What would it take to land like a cat? Cats survive falls that would kill you. Veterinarians have a name for it: high-rise syndrome. And it comes with a genuinely strange detail. Cats that fall from higher floors, 6, 8, 10 stories, often survive with fewer injuries than cats that fall from 3 or 4. Give a cat more time in the air, and it does something remarkable with it. It turns itself around, spreads out, relaxes, and lands on 4 feet, absorbing the impact like it planned the whole thing. You fall off a stepladder and break your wrist. So here's the actual question. Not why can't you do this, something more specific. What would have to change in your actual body for you to land like that? And once you see the answer, you'll understand why nobody who could do what a cat does could ever have written this sentence. Let's start with the part that happens before the landing, because a cat can't land safely if it can't see where it's landing in the first place.
Cats hunt at night,
in near darkness, and their eyes are built for exactly that job. Behind the retina sits a layer called the tapetum lucidum, a mirror-like structure that reflects light back through the retina a second time. It's why a cat's eyes seem to glow in a photo. Light that would normally pass through and be lost gets a second pass at triggering the light-sensitive cells. The result? Cats can see in roughly 1/6 the light a human needs to make out a scene. To land safely from a height, in low light, an animal needs to actually see the ground it's aiming for. This mirror layer is a huge part of how a cat manages that. So, step 1 of building a cat-capable human. Add a tapetum lucidum behind the retina. Here's the cost, and it's not small. That reflective layer doesn't just send light back to trigger more receptors. It also scatters some of that light sideways, slightly blurring the image. This is a real, measured trade-off in vision science. Animals with a strong tapetum lucidum consistently have lower visual acuity in bright light than animals without one. It's why your daytime vision, the kind that lets you read small text, recognize a face across a room, or thread a needle, is sharper than a cat's. A cat is optimized to detect a mouse moving in near total darkness. You're optimized to focus on fine detail in daylight, and those two designs pull in opposite directions inside the same eye. Give a human a working tapetum lucidum, and you don't just gain night vision, you lose meaningful daytime sharpness along with it. Reading, close detailed work, recognizing faces at a distance, all of it depends on precisely the kind of high-resolution daylight vision that a light-doubling mirror layer actively works against. That's the first price. Now the landing itself. Drop a cat upside down, even from a relatively short height, and it rights itself in a fraction of a second without ever touching anything to push off from. This is called the righting reflex, and it starts working in kittens as young as 3 to 4 weeks old. Here's the actual mechanism, and it depends on something specific about how a cat's skeleton is put together. A cat's spine has roughly 30 vertebrae compared to your 33, but far more importantly, an extraordinary amount of independent rotational movement between them. A cat can twist its front half almost completely independently of its back half, almost like 2 separate turntables stacked on top of each other, connected by a highly flexible spine. Twist the shoulders one way, the hips barely move. Then twist the hips to catch up, and the front barely moves in response. By alternating this twist, a falling cat can rotate its entire body 180 degrees with nothing to push against, using only its own momentum and inner ear balance signals to know which way is down. And there's a second piece, the collarbone. A cat's clavicle isn't rigidly connected to the rest of the skeleton the way yours is. It's small and mostly embedded in muscle, essentially floating, unattached to the shoulder blade the way a human collarbone locks the arm and shoulder into a fixed structure. This is a huge part of why a cat's front legs and shoulders have such extreme range of motion, enough to squeeze through gaps barely wider than its skull, and enough to rotate freely during a fall without the collarbone catching or resisting the twist. So, step 2 of building a cat-capable human. Give the spine dramatically more independent rotation between segments and detach the collarbone from a fixed connection to the shoulder blade.
Here's what that actually costs you.
And this is where the trade gets serious. Your collarbone isn't an accident. It's a strut, a rigid brace that holds your shoulder joint out and away from your rib cage, locked in place. That fixed structure is exactly what lets you throw a spear with real force, swing a hammer, do a pull-up, or carry weight balanced across your shoulders. A floating, cat-style collarbone trades away that rigid brace for range of motion and rotational freedom. You cannot have both a shoulder built for a maximally powerful, accurate overhand throw and a shoulder built to spin independently of your hips in midair. Anthropologists studying human shoulder anatomy have specifically pointed to the fixed clavicle and the resulting shoulder architecture as central to how humans became such uniquely effective throwers, a capability essentially no other primate has at anywhere near the same level, and one that mattered enormously for hunting with projectiles.
A cat's floating shoulder
Is built for acrobatics. A human's locked shoulder is built for throwing something hard, fast, and accurately at a target 30 feet away. You don't get to keep the second ability while installing the first. Then there's the spine itself. Extreme rotational flexibility between vertebrae is fantastic for twisting mid-fall. It's fairly disastrous for standing upright and walking on two legs. Human bipedal walking depends on a spine that's simultaneously flexible enough to absorb shock and rigid enough to transmit force efficiently down through the hips and legs with every stride, particularly through the lower back, where your own natural curve, the lumbar lordosis, does exactly that job. A spine with cat-level segment-to-segment rotation would struggle to hold that stable column shape your entire upright gait depends on. You trade an efficient, low-energy cost walking stride for the ability to spin freely in mid-air, an ability you'd only ever need in the rare event of actually falling. So here's the complete bill, side by side. To land like a cat, you would need to give up a meaningful amount of sharp, daytime vision, the kind you use to read, recognize faces, and do fine, detailed work. You would need to give up the rigid shoulder structure that makes you one of the most effective throwing animals that has ever existed. And you would need to give up the stable, efficient spinal column that lets you walk upright for miles without excessive energy cost. Notice what all three of those abilities have in common: sharp, daytime vision, powerful, accurate throwing, efficient, upright walking. Those aren't random human traits. Those are, according to a substantial body of anthropological research, some of the specific adaptations that let early humans out-hunt animals that were faster and stronger, using tools, thrown weapons, and long-distance pursuit instead of raw acceleration or acrobatic reflexes. A cat is built to be a solitary ambush predator, striking once from close range in darkness and needing an emergency recovery system for the rare moments that ambush goes wrong mid-leap. A human became a persistence hunter and toolmaker, needing daylight precision, throwing accuracy, and efficient long-distance movement far more often and far more usefully than an emergency air recovery system it would rarely ever need. You could, in principle, build a body that lands like a cat. Evolution simply never had a reason to, because the version of you that could do it would have been considerably worse at almost everything that actually mattered to your ancestors' survival on a near daily basis for millions of years. Before we finish, an honest note. Cats absolutely do still get seriously injured or killed in falls. High-rise syndrome is a genuine veterinary emergency, not evidence that cats are indestructible, and the phenomenon of shorter falls, sometimes being worse, is still debated, and likely involves several overlapping factors, not one single clean explanation. This isn't a story about a foolproof system. It's a story about what a body optimized for a very different set of problems actually looks like underneath. So the next time you watch a cat twist gracefully out of a fall and land clean, you're not looking at a superior design. You're looking at the other end of a trade you already won, in every situation that mattered far more often than falling ever did. You are not broken, you just bet on the throw instead of the landing.